Good morning and welcome back to 501c TV. I'm your host, Janelle Harris, and this is the podcast that talks to system change leaders, thought leaders, nonprofits, and nonprofit partners to find out what is new and exciting out there in our world, in the community of nonprofits. And so this morning I have with me Sue Mann, who is the founder of Bright Minds Processing. Good morning.
Good morning, Janelle.
I'm so excited to have you back here. Sue and I met a couple weeks ago, and I am really excited to dive in because I think your mission and organization that you kind of started here is super unique. And I think it's one that touches a lot of people that tune in and are in our area that have children. And we just have a lot to dive into today. So I hope you're ready.
I am.
Okay, good. All right. So let's start off with first, you. Where did you come from? What's your background? Tell us a little bit about maybe, the baseline of what Bright Minds Processing does. And then we can dive into how you got to start this organization.
So I grew up in Ireland. I moved here and became a cop, a police officer in San Francisco. And through my journeys, I learned a lot, about kids, juveniles, and I had a special interest in that. And then I had children.
Yeah.
And then when they started going to school, I saw that they were struggling in school. So I'm busy working, didn't understand it, and we tried everything. But at the end of the day, I realized they had a kind of a learning disability that nobody actually knew about. And it was a long journey, a lot of doctors, talking to teachers. And somewhere I found a fantastic mentor that taught me or showed me that my daughter had a vision problem.
That connected back to all of these other, challenges that she was having in school, right?
Yeah, she was struggling and she couldn't read, actually. And so when my mentor told me about the vision issue, I had taken her to the optometrist and, I'd done everything and it's a specialist and still they didn't come up with anything. So I had a hard time understanding that she had a vision problem.
Right. You're like, how is this connecting back? And we're going to get into that because there's kind of like two parts to kind of this awareness that you're raising around. It's kind of a two-part approach, right? It's like audio and visual. That is kind of like causing a lot of these challenges for kids that on the surface level is going undiagnosed, essentially, is what's happening, right?
Correct.
Yeah, so that's interesting. So how old are the kids now?
They are now 16 and 14.
Okay, and when did Bright Minds Processing become like a formal nonprofit?
In 2020, they were actually not doing well in school. Right before that, I knew, that we had to make changes. So I started Bright Minds in 2020 when I met a fantastic doctor called Dr. Leah Light.
Okay. Is she here in Florida?
She's out of Miami.
Yeah.
And she just is the queen of this learning disability that is completely hidden.
And she's the hearing specialist.
She's an audiologist, but she has studied the brain. So it's actually a brain issue, not your vision and hearing. Like your eyes and your ears are just messengers. And she taught me that it's the brain that's not functioning properly.
Okay.
And it's stopping them from reading and hearing.
Interesting. And so, let's talk about in schools, what's the common thing then? So a child is maybe younger. Is it usually starting with stemming from reading?
It stems from reading and it always pops up in 7th grade, along with every other learning disability.
Okay.
They always think it's ADHD, ADD, or definitely dyslexia. They will absolutely push you in that direction. And for my kids, I knew it wasn't. I knew that it just wasn't that. But that's the only diagnosis you can get. Okay. So I had to run with it.
Yeah, and so that's interesting. So you pushed a little harder, right? Because you were like, this just doesn't feel right. Did you think it was more of a mother's intuition? You felt like, I know my kids, this isn't, I don't think that that's what this is? Or what made you want to explore a little bit further? Or was it when you just came across, you were researching and you found this doctor in Miami?
It was the doctor in Miami, but mostly the teachers when they would say my kids were totally capable of doing the work, but they just wouldn't do it.
Yeah.
And I was like, sense. And they were always in trouble. They were always not paying attention or losing their recess because they didn't get their work on time.
Got it.
And I was like, my daughter used to cry all the time. She was like, she lost everything. She was never allowed to do so many things because it took her that long to do her work.
Yeah.
And then my boy just started acting out. So he was always in trouble. And I always thought that they didn't listen, to what we were saying and they weren't following direction. But it comes to find out they couldn't actually hear and process the words.
Oh my gosh, that's so interesting. So, how much work has been done on studying this?
So once I tuck into something, I just don't let go. So I had originally met a doctor in California, Dr. Keiji Yama, that was just a genius. And I was there in California at the time, and my daughter went to 3 weeks of intensive therapy with him.
Okay.
And she went from not being able to read, just like baby books.
Yeah.
And then she was into chapter books when she was done with him.
And she was how old when she went through this?
She was only 7, turning 8.
She was 7, turning 8 wow, that's pretty crazy.
So I knew my journey wasn't over yet. I just had a gut feeling that it wasn't over. But, that we moved to Florida and the journey began again.
Right.
And then 2 years passed, and then lo and behold, I saw that my son had the exact same problem. And so we had to search for a doctor. We found great doctors here too. And it was a lot of work. But until I went back to Dr. Keiji Yama in California, I wanted to get my son to him too, and we did. We went back to California, did 3 weeks of intensive therapy, and came back, and it was a game changer.
And what does he do specifically?
So what they probably would call it is brain training.
Yeah.
It's your eyes are not teaming together. You might have conversion issues. You might skip lines. Your letters might run into themselves. You could skip words. Like my son skipped the little words like in, at, where you can't make the sentence up. And so
Interesting.
he would do all sorts of exercises, and it's very strenuous on the brain. And the kids hate it.
I'm sure.
It was, and they come out with headaches and they're tired. But at the end of the day, they sail on through, and it's just a game changer.
And is it really just trying to strengthen your brain and your eyes to process correctly, like at the same time? Is that really what's happening?
They trick your eyes into working at the same time, and like my son, his eyes were like they were like far apart, and then they ended up pulling them closer together. My daughter was much the same. So they both had conversion issues too. So you could throw a ball at them and it would hit them in the chest and then they'd catch it.
That's unbelievable.
And for on top of that, you add in the audio part of it where they can't hear and process. They can hear the sounds, but they can't process the words. So they will be in school and they don't know what the teacher's saying.
Yeah, and one of the things on your website here. So on your website, it's nice. It kind of breaks down because it's not typical. You wouldn't have like an audio without the visual, right? Would you have? You would have to be both for this, right? Or would you have one or the other?
It's the same part of the brain. Dr. Keiji Yama says if you have one, you have the other. He rarely sees it that not. And the same thing with Dr. Light. I believe it's the same part of the brain, and you can work on it on the same part of the brain and come up with it will improve no matter what.
Sure, but it's all kind of working in conjunction.
I do believe you have both.
Yeah, because it was interesting in here because you kind of break down like the APD and VPD is what you break it down, the auditory processing disorder and then the visual processing disorder. And I thought it was interesting because in the auditory one, it was like it's basically like your child sitting in class and listening to their teacher and all they're hearing is their teacher going blah 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 blah, which of course they're not going to learn anything or be engaged if it's just not connecting there. So I thought that was kind of funny. I think that's how my kids hear me when I talk to them sometimes.
And that's what everyone says. They're like, oh, they're not just paying attention or they don't want to hear what you have to say.
And that might be sometimes, but not every day, all day, every time they're in class.
And it's such a struggle, and it's such a game changer when you get them the help they need. And they go through such a tough time at school, and the teachers are always on them, and they say, they don't try. And I don't know any kid that gets up in the morning that goes to school that's not going to try.
Right, especially when they're surrounded by their peers and they're at that younger age where they all want to be the best, they all want to be called on. That's pretty typical. So it's pretty fascinating. Tell me about the kind of like the checklist, if you will, because I do feel like a lot of times, kids have a similar kind of set of characteristics and challenges, and then they kind of get thrown into like these categories. So these three, like ADD, ADHD, maybe autism. What are some of the checklists that you would say that would lead a parent to want to just explore maybe a step further and say, hey, it might be a processing disorder instead of something else? Like, how do you make that leap as a parent to know?
So it's hard for a parent to understand if we say they have a vision and hearing problem.
Sure.
Like they just don't, they're like their kid is 20/20 vision, and that's fine.
Mm-hmm.
But when their kid is getting an F in language arts in middle school, there's a reason for it.
Mm-hmm.
These kids read a page and they don't know what they read, so
Right.
they can't possibly answer a question.
Sure. How can you comprehend that? And
Also in math, you can't read the math question, so how could you answer it?
Mm-hmm.
So all in all, their grade's going to be absolutely horrendous. Their best grade is going to be PE.
yeah, totally.
And that's the only subject they will like.
right.
And that is the biggest one. I always say to kids, hey, do you like reading? If they hate reading, I know kids don't run around with books, especially boys don't want to read.
Sure.
But if they hate reading, that is a big, big signal.
Okay.
And if they say, I don't remember what I read, that means that they haven't processed what they read. So that's another game changer. And the hearing, I always find, if it's extreme, I will say something to a kid and they'll say what before I even say the sentence.
Interesting.
And I'll be like, hey, I didn't finish the sentence yet.
Yeah.
You know what?
How can you answer it?
Wait for it.
Yeah, I haven't even asked you yet, so how could you know how to answer it? That's interesting.
Yeah.
What
And-
other things have you noticed? That's
And
Interesting.
especially in sports, when you have a conversion issue, you can't aim. Like my son plays basketball.
Mm-hmm.
Before that, if you threw a ball at him, it would hit him in the chest. Now
and then he would reach for
eye
it.
coordination is unbelievable. His shot is unbelievable. They call him the Steph Curry
Really?
of basketball.
Oh,
And we had another kid that was a soccer player, and he turned volleyball, and it was even worse than volleyball for him. And now his volleyball is off the charts.
really?
So it's also like for sports, like baseball players, they do vision therapy. Football players, it's a huge thing.
That's interesting. It's like you don't really like hear about it or read about it. Why do you think that is?
I think that it's because it's, first of all, you can't get diagnosed with it.
Right.
So there isn't a psychologist that I know of that could even put it on paper, even if they wanted to, because there's no such diagnosis. And it's not medical either, so it's not covered by medical insurance.
That's right. I remember you were talking. Let's talk about that a little bit. That's a challenge.
It's a huge challenge because if you convince a parent the reason their kids are getting an F is not because they're being lazy or not because they don't want to do it, it's because they can't possibly do it because
Sure.
they've got a hidden learning disability that nobody's going to recognize.
Right.
Teachers don't know about it. And so that's one big thing. And then you tell them that this therapy, this brain training therapy,
Yeah.
is going to cost a fortune. And that is a game changer too, because most parents think, well, I send my kids to school or private school.
Right.
It's the teacher's job to make sure that they get where they go. And you would say, yeah, if the teachers had any idea.
No clue about any of
They
this.
have no
Yeah.
clue.
Yeah.
And you have to pay for it, and it is expensive. No doctor takes, any doctor doesn't take insurance. So
And this is definitely like the 3-week kind of program.
it's much more than I put it into 3 weeks because I was leaving California.
I got you.
I had to jam it into
I
3
see.
weeks.
So you like fast forwarded it. You did the fast track plan.
I did.
I
Well,
got
we would
you.
say, we are about to do a medical study, and we're going to take a group of children, and we would say that in 18 weeks that we can do vision and hearing and everything and then some in 18 weeks. We hope to shorten it,
Yeah.
but that's what it is right now, and we are hoping to raise enough awareness and funds that we can help the children that will never get the help they need.
That's so interesting. So, so after you go through this training, okay, you go through the therapy and you get the improvement on it. Is there any long-term like maintenance? Like, do you have to keep doing this, or is it just then
There is
you brain
absolutely
trained and you're good?
There's absolutely no maintenance. It is that your brain, your ears and your eyes are trained. Your ears are the same thing. They're not hearing together at the same time.
Yeah, that's interesting.
So what they do is they trick your ears into hearing together at the same time. And it's a game changer. When you have the two combined, you walk away. Now you can hear in class what the teacher, exactly what she's teaching and what she or he is saying. And you can go home and do your homework.
How do these kids go forward into like adulthood
They
with
really
something like
struggle.
this?
By middle school, by third grade, they're asked to stay back a year, which is not as bad in middle school. But when you get in elementary,
Yeah.
but when you get to middle school, it's horrendous.
Yeah, there's a lot of stigma there.
There's a lot of stigma, and it's embarrassing.
Yeah, totally.
And so
self-esteem thing. I mean, it just affects so many different things.
And they're always pulled out for special ed, and all the other kids, the normal kids as we call them, they think, oh, they're weird. Like,
right, something's wrong with them.
Yeah, something wrong with them.
That's terrible.
So that's the killer. But by high school, they're cooked. They're embarrassed. They can't do their subjects. They're really struggling, and they usually, in my opinion, they either drop out of school early or go the other direction and enter into the criminal justice system.
Yeah, because then it's a behavior thing. Because what other path do I have?
And they don't have an opportunity to go to college. They don't have an opportunity to graduate with a diploma. And so that is where me and Dr. Light stepped in. We decided in 2020 that we would take on. Originally, Dr. Light wanted to go into the prison system, but me being in law enforcement for all those years, I thought, well, let me try and see, can we prevent it from going?
Right. Yes, of course.
And so we're trying to hit it, like we want to do third grade, as many as we can, but middle school for sure. And we'd like to make it part of probation, especially if kids are truant, that if they are going through probation, part of their probation is to be tested for this learning disability that nobody knows about, and it is a game changer.
Oh my goodness. It just seems like there's so much like work to be done to get the education out there on it, and to even like let people know about this. Because I mean, before we met, like a couple weeks ago, I was like fascinated. I was like, oh my gosh, I need to hear more about this because it's such a game changer. Like, why am I not hearing about this everywhere? Will I? I probably will.
And so my hairdresser, I've been going to her for years, but I sent her, we did a segment with Channel 12 with Matt Lincoln recently on why kids can't read. And I sent her the video and she was like, oh my gosh, I have it. I've had it all my life.
Really?
And when she was going to school, she had such anxiety that she hated going to school every day. And that's what these kids are. If you ask any kid that hates school, they don't want to go to school. There's a reason
for that.
What is it? And they will tell you if you dig into it. It's because they can't do their work.
Wow, that's crazy. So let's talk about the schools, right? So how do the schools feel about this? Do they want this in their schools? Do they want this little like piece of checklist? Should our teachers have a checklist? Because I know you have this checklist on your website.
Yeah, we have two checklists, one for vision and one for hearing.
Okay.
We are going to raise awareness and go into the school system. We're working with the school district right now to educate the teachers, and it will be a huge help. And I know once we tell them, they're like, oh, I get it.
Yeah.
So usually when you get to the stage where you have a child with, there's something going on, they usually advise you, or you do it yourself. The school does a battery of tests on you to see, can you get a diagnosis. And what's really sad is, and I don't know, is it all over the country, but in Florida, you're more than likely going to get either diagnosed with ADHD or dyslexia.
There's a ton of that, yes.
And the thing about dyslexia, if you get diagnosed with dyslexia, you cannot walk that back off your record. It's there.
Right.
And 80% of dyslexia kids, and I don't want to upset the dyslexia world and all their advocates, but 80% of kids are not dyslexic. They have a vision issue. Their letters run into each other. They skip lines.
It makes total sense, yeah.
So this testing is very reasonable. You go to a vision doctor or a hearing doctor that specializes in these things, and maybe for a couple of $100, you don't have to do that whole big battery of testing.
Got it. It's kind of like a preliminary. You kind of like ease into it.
You ease into
type
it.
Testing.
If you do get diagnosed with it, you can fix it easily, and therefore you don't even have to worry about doing a battery of testing. And I know that's very costly.
Yeah, for sure. So let's talk a little bit about. Let's talk about your kids. So your kids went through this. How are the kids doing today?
My kids are doing outstanding.
Such a good story.
So the whole thing was, everyone was like, oh, your kids are so gifted, they're so smart. And I'm like, how could they be gifted when they're failing in school?
Right. So
I did the gifted test before and after. Before, it was horrendous. My kids, they were terrible scores. And then after all of the auditory and the vision therapy, and they finished and completed it, I tested again, and they were indeed gifted. So my girl was like a 138, my son was a 131, and they ended up going to the Weiss Gifted School in Palm Beach Gardens.
Oh, that's so awesome.
Which was incredible. And I was pretty nervous that they wouldn't be able to get along there, but they went in there and they were thriving. and they've since got an academic scholarship to a fantastic private school, and they're doing amazing.
It's such a, I mean, that's like, it's like the perfect ending, you know, not the ending, that's not the end of their story because they're still in school, but like it's the perfect way to just kind of like put a bow on it because you know it works, right? You know that this is like, it's so needed and it's so necessary. And
when you're a parent, you get called into the school all the time, and your kid is a problem child because of, you know, academics or behavior or whatever it is or whatever they think it is. And like today I just left the school and I did all of my daughter's teachers, and each and every one of them, she's straight A, accelerated in every subject.
It's so rewarding.
And I was looking at the teachers and I'm like, if they had any idea what our journey was like to get to this position,
right.
Number one, there wouldn't be enough time to tell them, and number two, they would never understand it.
No, and that's the thing, like, you know, if you could go back and tell yourself, you know, however many years ago when you were first going through that with your daughter, like, if you could tell yourself back then now, like, hey, this is what's going to happen down the road, you probably would have been like, what? Like, how is this going to happen, you know? So that's such a great story.
And so for me, Dr. Light always said to me, you should tell your story. And I'm like, nobody would want to hear it. But then over time, I was like, you know what? People need to hear the story.
Absolutely.
Because it makes a game changer.
It really is. And it makes, it really makes you understand the whole mission and why you're doing what you're doing and why it's so important. I mean, how many other kids out there are just like yours and went through the same thing?
Well, I can tell you, it's 1 in 4.
Is it really 1 in 4?
It's 1 in 4, and I hate to say it, it's hereditary.
That was my question. I was wondering if this was something that they thought through their studies that you were born with it, or was it something environmental?
It is you're born with it, and it is. My husband actually has it, and he came home one day and he goes, "I think I have APD." And I'm like, I don't even know what that is, but you know. And what he said was like, for him, he had to finish school early because he didn't get any help when he was growing up.
Sure.
And he went into the construction world, and he was like, his supervisors would come up and give him instruction, and they would say like 7 things, and he didn't catch the first thing they said.
Right. And he's like, I'm still back here trying to get the first item off the list. That's got to be just.
And then he heard that on the radio, and he goes, "That's me."
That is unbelievable.
And I just thought, you know, it was, you know, being married to him, he didn't want to hear what I had to say.
You know, like there's actually a reason for it. Yeah, that is unbelievable.
Yeah, it's unbelievable. So that, to me, I know that we're the first in the nation and the world to do what we're doing here in Palm Beach County. The doctors that have gotten together to make a difference, they're passionate and brilliant. And it's just, it's an honor that I get to lead the way.
Yeah, for sure.
And to go into the schools. I've already spoke to the school districts, and they're all on board. And that's another thing. Since it's not a learning disability, it's not recognized.
Right. And that's the thing, like, how do you categorize that and be able to build that into something that, like, the teachers then are aware of and the schools are aware of? So that's interesting. How will you handle that, you think?
So I am meeting with the representative that just passed a special education law last year to help teachers and help them with kids with learning disabilities. I have an appointment with her to see, will she sponsor the bill just to bring that in Florida, you know, to Tallahassee.
Yes.
She's on the education committee in Tallahassee. She has 24 on her committee. They all voted unanimously last year for that.
That's huge.
Particular thing. So if I could just at the minimum get that on the record that it is a learning disability and that everyone should be taking a look at it. Yeah. That would be first and foremost for Florida.
That would be huge. And I love that you're like, you told me, you're like, I'm going in like, you know, gangbusters to get this done. But why not start in Tallahassee and, you know, and have that in your back pocket and then work back from there. And I think it's amazing. It's absolutely incredible. So before we run out of time, we do have a very exciting event that you guys have going on that I want to talk about. So tell me about this first ever literacy roundtable that's set for November 20th, right here in Lake Worth Beach. I'm gonna let you tell our viewers about this. What is it all about? It's actually really cool. You have a lot of really amazing people that are coming to this, but I'll let you explain what the event is, what it's all about.
So the way I look at it, everybody in Palm Beach County to do with education, everybody wants to make a difference. Everyone wants the reading level up.
Yes.
So we do know that third grade reading test scores around the country determines the prison population later on.
Interesting.
And we all want to do something about it now than later. We all want to raise, there's 3,600 students in Palm Beach School District, the public school district, that are in third grade and at first grade level reading.
Yeah, I believe that.
And they're the children that I need to help. And so I said to myself, there's so many agencies all working, helping, tutoring, doing all sorts of great stuff for these children.
Yeah.
But unless they get the help that they deserve,
Yeah.
it's not going to change.
And the right help.
Exactly.
You know, because you can tutor and have them read and do all this stuff, but if they are truly reading and they're not comprehending and there's a reason behind that, you're just kind of like spinning your wheels. And
so our goal is to get the third graders in our school district that are at first grade level reading to third grade before they move on.
Yeah, for
so
sure.
that would be super cool. So I went to all the organizations and did all my research and found everybody and anybody that actually wants to help and is already helping children that read, like the Literacy Coalition,
Yes.
Child Service Council. And I found Matt Lincoln from Channel 12.
Awesome.
And his job is that why kids can't read. So I got with him and we did a segment on it, and we it was unbelievable how many people heard that and, had never heard of it before, and,
Right.
and Matt included. So Matt said to me, wouldn't it be something if we did a round table where we got everybody under the same roof? And I was like, oh my gosh, let's do it.
Yeah, I love it.
So we finally got it together and we put it out there, and we are this lovely lady, Kelly Olive from Common Ground. She has a beautiful building where she offered to host and sponsor the event. It's going to be in Common Ground in Lake Worth Beach.
Yes.
We are going to have 4 speakers. One is going to be Dr. Marciano, who's just a regular optometrist.
Okay.
And what we want to let everybody know, the school district, parents, we just want to let them know that first and foremost, just have your kids' vision tested for 2020.
Yeah, for sure.
Because that's first and foremost. It might stop at that. But then when it gets past that, then there's other organizations like Roots and Wings. Ted.
Ted's been here. I love Roots and Wings.
Ted is unbelievable.
Ted's awesome.
He goes into the schools. He pays the teachers to help
Yes.
them tutor in the evenings.
Yeah, he's so sweet.
And what he's doing is amazing. And then there's Bob Hannon from the Center of Creative Education. He's doing so much work out there to help the school district and help these kids get to a higher level. And so they're the organizations that we're all doing the same thing. We're all working on the same kids.
So genius.
So we're getting together with that. And then once I get everybody under the one roof and they know and see what we're doing, they'll realize that you can give them all the tutoring in the world. It's not going to help.
Absolutely.
You can send them to all sorts of mathnasiums and you name it, and after school programs, and you're just going to stop their will to live.
That's really just like a blanket over the or a Band-Aid over the real issue.
And it's just more torture to children. They already had a tough day at school.
Yeah.
They don't want to do any homework because they don't know how to do it.
Right.
And then you're going to push them into all these classes.
Yeah.
So my hope and vision is that everybody collaborates at that meeting. And I hope to get FAU and NOVA.
That'd be
NOVA
amazing.
is where the doctors, the optometrists, and the audiologists graduate from. We have it right here on our doorstep.
Yep.
I would love them to be there. And FAU, because it's a brain thing.
Oh, and what an awesome event to just, you get all the right people in the right place at the right time to really just address it. Then you're not kind of like, chipping away, chip all around the community. You get everybody there all at once, which is really
we
cool.
also, Kevin McCormack is from the school district. He's the director of special ed. And, he already knows all of us. So, and we always think about the school district. They have their hands full with all the learning disabilities and horrendous kids that have just, autism and all these other things. This is a simple fix. This is something that's simple that we hope eventually to implement in the school district during school time.
Yeah.
And get to as many kids as possible.
That'd be amazing. I'm looking forward to seeing all the good stuff that comes down
Thank you
down
very
the
much,
line.
and thank you for having me.
I was so excited for you to come back here. So I hope everyone learned a lot today. There is a lot to know, but your website's awesome too, and we will follow along. So thank you for being here. And that's it for today on 501c TV. We probably could have talked another 3 hours. But again, this is Sue Mann with Bright Minds Processing. So follow along and let's see all the amazing work that's happening right here in our backyard, and I've no doubt beyond as the time goes on. So we'll see you next time on 501c TV. A special thank you again to Kana House Studios, Wellington's first and only content creation studio, and we will see you next time. Thank you.